I'm traveling from Washington, D.C. to Boston to visit my parents, whom I haven't seen in over 16 months due to COVID. My dad, who turns 94 in 6 months, has been talking for years about writing his memoirs, but never got around to it. I decided to bring my camera on this trip to record the story of his life, not just for me and my siblings, but for his grandchildren, and especially his great-grandchildren, whom are too young to understand all that he went through. This is for my father. This is his story. So yesterday, we got to the point where you were talking about getting married.
Right, and we covered that.
Yeah, can we kind of pick up from the point where you ended up getting married? What was life like at that point?
It was very, very good. We were living in Brooklyn Heights. I think I mentioned that. And you remember, Brooklyn Heights, that was the first stop from Manhattan. When you take the IRT, the first stop in Brooklyn was Clark Street, which was the St. George Hotel. I think it was St. George Hotel. And we lived right there, not too far from the promenade. And we liked living there. We loved living there. We didn't have any children to drive us crazy. So Mom and I had a good time. I often think back during those times. Mom was working at the State Employment Service at the time, and I think I was working there possibly, not sure, and I was also going to Columbia part-time. I remember coming in late at night from classes, and Cassie, our first cat, meeting me at the door. She would hear me. We lived on the, I believe, the 3rd floor, and Esther would tell me that Cassie somehow knew I was coming in. I don't know how she could hear the lobby door opening downstairs.
She would wait by the door?
And she'd wait right by the door, the entrance to the apartment. And I remember picking her up and greeting her there. So we had a studio apartment there, and we loved living there. I kind of visualized the apartment. We had a Castro convertible that we lived in one side, and had a small kitchen, and with the bathroom off the kitchen. And then we had a little dining area where we had a marble top table. I thought we gave the marble top to you many years
for
later.
A long time, yes.
And we put up some shelves to hold our library, our books. We had a lot of books. Even then, we started having books, collecting books. Some of which we still have. Mom told you she worked at the Book of the Month Club, and we would buy Book of the Month Club books, and we still have loads of them that I hope that you and your siblings will take.
Okay.
Anyway, while we were there, we weren't making a lot of money at the time. I think Mom's salary was $5,000 a year. And my salary, when I was working, I think was $2,700 a year. But we managed to budget, and food was everything was relatively, cheap and geared to that. But we went on vacation even then. This is when we started our vacation. Matter of fact, we went up to Maine on our vacation, and you have that photo that a friend took who visited us while we were up there.
Right.
So it was good. It was good. We were, because as an interracial couple, when we went on vacation, we didn't know what we were going to face in Maine. We didn't have a car, by the way. So how did we get up to Maine? I'll talk about that later. But anyway, when we saw a place we wanted to go to or rent, we composed a letter saying that we were an interracial couple. We'd be interested in renting your, place. We saw your ad. That way we could avoid going up there and someone taking a look at us and saying, "Whoops, the place was sold, or rather, rent it," and so on. If someone called or wrote back and said, "We'd love to have you," that means, they know they're getting an interracial couple, and we're not going to have any problems with these people. So the first place we went to responded accordingly. This was a place on Islesboro that you later visited right before, I guess around your first birthday, or shortly afterwards. It was located off the coast of Portland, Maine. We had to take a ferry out there, and since we didn't have a car, we had to take a taxi to this house, 7-room house that we rented, I think, for $27 a week.
Wow.
Well, that was it. We didn't have a lot of money, but then things weren't expensive. When we were there, we ate lobster, luxury. What did it cost? I think 30 cents a pound at the time.
My goodness.
Later, a few years later, when it went up to 59 cents a pound, we decided, gee, it's so expensive. Can we afford to eat lobster?
59 cents.
Anyway, we took, since we didn't have a car, we took a bus up, and of course we'll have to talk about that and what happened, so on. A lot of stories connected with the Islesboro and that house. But anyway, getting back to Brooklyn, we did live there. We lived there from 1957, when we got married, shortly before 57, till Esther was pregnant with you. And by the time we moved, we were at Park Place, where you were born. Not Park Place, Prospect Place. You were born on not on Prospect Place, but we were living on Prospect Place. You were born, I think, at Unity Hospital in Brooklyn, my recollection, and so on. Living in Brooklyn, it was interesting and fun. We loved living because when we found out that Esther was pregnant with you, we knew we needed a bigger place. So again, we wanted to make sure we had a safe place, a good place, a place that we would be happy, we could raise you, and so on, and not have any difficulty. We were conscious that even though we were in New York and we had never been threatened or anything like that, we were conscious that we were an interracial couple, and we were going to take whatever preemptive precautions that we could do.
Right.
And so we wrote. We were looking for ads. We saw this apartment that turned out to be the apartment that we rented. As you know, from the Owens, Major and Ethel. They wrote back and said they are an interracial couple and they'd be happy to have us, and so on and so on. So we rented the apartment from them. We had the downstairs apartment and the use of a garden, as you remember, or do you remember? I don't know. And they had the 2 floors upstairs, and we stayed there. I don't remember the years, but we stayed there for few, maybe 3 years or so, and Mom perhaps can fill in how many years, until we moved to the Park Place house that we bought, the 3-story brownstone at 401. We had, at the time, I was working with gang groups. New York had a lot of gang groups at that time. And I remember reading an article in the New York Post about fighting gangs and how the city sent out people to veterans like myself to work with those gangs to try and rechannel their energies into more socially acceptable activities. And I was impressed with that, so I called the city and asked if I could apply for that job. They said yes, and I was accepted as a member of the New York City street club. And I did, and I was assigned to street gangs. My first assignment was out in Long Island City in New York. And so my area that I patrolled, that I worked, was Astoria, Queens. I was assigned to that area. And at the time they had white gangs, black gangs. Then the cities, of course, were segregated. What else is new? And I had a partner who worked with the white gangs that they was, and his name turned out to be Frank Serpico, the New York City policeman.
Wow.
That we all read about what happened to Frank. So that was a fascinating job, and by the time I left, I'd become a supervisor of my particular unit out in Queens. But I had odd hours. I remember when you were born, I would work from, I think, 2 to 10. That was my, 2 to 10. And you were, by the way, a great baby. I'll have to say this. You, I think, would be up at the time I would come in, and I would say hello to you and hold you and everything, and then put you in your crib, and you would go right to sleep. Or sometimes, and I don't remember what happened, I'd come in the morning. Oh God, Esther, you'll have to help me on this. How good John was. I would come from work, and he would wake up, and I remember holding him, and at the time I would go to sleep, he would go to sleep. He was very cooperative. Do you remember that?
I remember that he used to lie in the crib and just look at the ceiling and gurgle.
Well, yeah, but that was another thing. Yeah, well, he would do that in contrast to the other kids. But I remember when I had these odd work hours, and I'd come home and John would be awake, and I would be able to hold him, and then it was time for him to go to bed. He'd go to bed, no problem, and it just worked out beautifully. Anyway, we were coordinated in terms of my being able to see you at those odd times, and go to sleep, because I go to sleep, and I'm mixing up the two. I had a part-time job in between semesters. That's it. When I worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and I would come home very early in the morning, I think when Jonathan was waking up. And yes, I would get a chance to hold you. You were just waking up, and play with you and everything. And then I was ready to go to sleep. And I would just hand you off to Mom. And it was just a smooth handoff. And you said, kind of, okay, bye. And you'd go and play. And there would be no interruption. I could sleep without, having you yell and scream.
Right.
And make, a lot of racket. But that was a time we lived with the Owens.
Can I interrupt for just
Sure.
1 second? Because some of our family members and other people that are going to watch this, they don't know about Frank Serpico, and I don't want to make a long digression, but can you just
Yeah.
talk for a second, because he ended up being a very well-known person.
Right, and a lot of it have gone past my memory now, but very, very briefly. Frank, before he became a policeman, he was worked for the New York City Youth Board, youth gang worker the same as I was, and we were partners. And I said he was assigned to the white section of Astoria, and there was a dividing line with the Corona Counts that I work with, the black gang, and the Astoria, forgotten what they were on the other side.
Mhm.
And of course we'd go out into our separate areas, and then we'd converse and pass intelligence along to each other as to what's going on, what's going to go down, what's slated to go down, and so on. But then Frank wanted to be a policeman, and that was his goal. And he was a good policeman, an excellent policeman, but there was a lot of corruption in the police department. There's still a lot of corruption in police departments around the country. Now, as we all know, there are a lot of good policemen and a lot of bad policemen. Same then, same here.
Right.
But anyway, Frank became a policeman and joined the force. And I remember him when he got out of the academy, coming back to the office, showing us his new .38. That's what policemen carried at the time. Shows you how far back that was. They were issued .38s, revolvers, and showing us his badge and everything. And Frank was really, really good at his job. Almost immediately, he spoke Italian. I think he also spoke French. So he was put on the undercover squad, and he would come in and he would practice his accents and show us this, that, and the other. We were fascinated by that. Wished him well. Anyway, Frank became a policeman, and all was well until he would go out and his buddy would say, "Just a moment, I'm going to go and get a cup of coffee." Come back out, give Frank a cup of coffee, and then start divvying out money. Frank said, "What's this?" Never mind, this is, blah, blah, blah. Frank was uncomfortable with this, but this is what was going on.
Right.
They were taking, bribes and what have you from God knows from everyone. Fast forward, Frank broke this whole thing open, and there were spreads and articles in the New York Times. Want to go back sometime, go back, look at some old New York.
He became famous.
Oh, he became very, very famous. Fast forward here, because we could talk about this for hours. Fast forward, Frank was on a raid, I think it was a drug raid with some other colleagues. And Frank was wounded, he was shot, and he was taken to Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, which was, as you know, walking distance from us. You know that because
Right.
you had swallowed enough pennies that we took you to Brooklyn. And poor thing, you broke your arm once, so that's another story. But anyway, about Frank, when he was at Brooklyn Hospital, I went to see him, and when I went to the front desk at the hospital, who do you want to see? I want to see Frank Serpico. Who are you? Blah, blah, blah. I identified myself, and they called up to Frank's room. Frank would verify that I was who I said I was. And I went up to his hotel room to see him.
Hospital.
And of course, his hospital room. And he was surrounded, by policemen. He was, the room, was completely surrounded with policemen. And Frank and I talked, and he showed me cards that I thought he was going to show me get well cards. It was something like these cards from policemen saying something, or from someone saying you got yours, or blah blah blah. Anyway, Frank later, he just resigned from the force, and I remember him telling me that, and my reading in New York Times. And other newspaper articles, Frank would go to a party. Do you remember our mantelpiece in the old house in Brooklyn?
Mm-hmm.
Frank said that when he would go to a party, either he told me this or I read this, I think I read this, Frank would stand with his back against the mantelpiece and with his weapons ready so that he could see people coming in. So he just never trusted anyone. Anyway, when I retired and moved here, they did a follow-up article on him many years later, and I wrote and we corresponded very, very briefly, but then we stopped, we just lost track. And I think he still lives someplace in upstate New York. But anyway, that's the Serpico piece.
And they ended up making a movie about
And
his
they make
life.
it, there is a movie, Serpico. One day we'll have to watch it together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
I remember watching it when I was young.
Is that
Anyway,
right?
I know that's a digression, but I just wanted to
Right.
let everybody know, because
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
a household name.
Sure. Okay. Anyway, we're in New York now, and we're living in Brooklyn. I remember when you were growing up, and when all of you were growing up, and I got my first Polaroid camera and took a picture of you, and we have that picture someplace. Esther, you remember, in the backyard with the two of you? Remember?
Right.
Around Christmas time, you were 1 year, it was, I think, your birthday around this, no, it was 6 months after. You were a year and a half, I think.
Okay.
I think so. Or was it 6 months? We'll have to look at that. And anyway, that we were there, and of course you remember the pictures of you sitting on the Volkswagen. You don't remember, but you
I've
and
seen
the
the
Owen
pictures,
kids
yes.
and Emily, and so we moved to Park Place, and this is when we start growing up, and you growing up, and we had the whole downstairs as a playroom. It used to be, when we bought the house, the previous owners used it as a nursery school, and Mom also used it as a
Like a daycare.
daycare for some years. And we're still in touch with people that we met, 60s plus years ago.
Isn't that how we met the Bermucci's?
That is how we were at that house when we met.
At the playground, actually.
We met the Bermucci's. I'm not sure how we met them. I think we met them.
Wasn't that at the playground, Mom?
I don't think we met them there. I
Sure.
think we met them either at the Ketchum's house, because they rented an apartment. Was it near the Ketchums or from the Ketchums? Because I remember when Lisa was a little girl, I remember we were talking, she'd go into the kitchen, get canned food, and she came and brought it to me. And that's how we
met the Cocuses there too.
Yeah, we did, but I think the Bermucci's were renting a house, an apartment there.
Right.
That's how we met them. But that was the beginning of how we would start branching out and meeting people and becoming volunteers in the community. We did that. Mom and I spent a big chunk of our time, in addition to raising you guys, doing volunteers. I was on the Brooklyn, was it the Brooklyn City Council? Esther, was that what it was called?
Something.
Or was it the Brooklyn?
Neighborhood.
Was it
something.
Brooklyn? What? Maybe it was the City Council. How did I get on that? I don't remember. No, I don't remember. But I remember having lots of dealings with not only the Brooklyn borough president who appointed me, but Mayor Koch later on, and being in Crown Heights with the mayor and working with the Hasidic Jews and so on. That was all of my work. Mom worked with the, as you know, you won't remember, she edited the newspaper of your grade school, and I was president of the Parent Association, and the president of the Block Association. So we were active while you were growing up, and those were interesting times, good times.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you were working with the gangs, what was that like? Was that scary? I would assume that there were some dangerous. That was a dangerous assignment.
It could have been. There were some tense moments, and one of the things that we did when we the street gang workers, when we went into an area, the very first thing I did was go to the local precinct. At the time, the police department, the New York City Police Department, had gang units. They had policemen whose primary duty was to oversee and to monitor gang activities. So the very first thing I did, that we all did, and this was protocol, go to the precinct, introduce ourselves to the precinct captain, and ask to be introduced to the gang unit so that those people would know us.
Who you were.
Yeah, fast forward, I would be out, for example, at night, with the gangs in a park. They would hang out at night. That's when they became active. That's when they did get into all of their activities. I would be out in the park with the gang. Picture, say, Franklin Park or Prospect Park, Brooklyn. But although I worked in Queens now, I would be out in the park when all nice people were sleeping. The gangs would be doing whatever gang, sitting around, smoking marijuana, doing this, planning what their next move would be, blah, blah, blah. And I'm making contact with them, trying to get to know them, who the leaders were, who the followers were, who I should focus on, and so on. The police would see all of us in a group sitting around talking, and they'd come in with their guns drawn. Okay, everybody up against the wall, and I'm up against the wall. They'd come over, and I wouldn't move. They'd get to me, and I said, I'm on duty. I'm such and such, blah blah blah. And my ID is here, and they say, oh, okay. They'd leave immediately because
They let you do your thing.
I got it. I'm saying, I got this, and they said, I got it, and they would leave. If I hadn't done this, they wouldn't know who the hell I was, But once I identified myself as a street gang worker, I have my tag, my badge, everything, not a badge, but my ID card that they could check, and they knew, from the precinct.
Did you get close to any gang members?
Yeah, I did. As a matter, it's an interesting question because one of the gang members, a couple of the gang members, and they had all kinds of needs. And we became not only gang members, but father figures. We were social workers. Mm-hmm. And I remember sending some who had very bad dental needs to my sister's dentist. Ida worked as a dental assistant to a dentist in Harlem. So I sent this particular kid to her dentist, who did the work free of charge.
Oh, wow.
Because Ida had introduced me to him, and I said, I have this kid who's in pain, he can't afford, blah, blah, blah. We did this. So yeah, and one kid introduced, I became very close to, I want you to meet my mom, or someplace we were at a community center, and I think his mother showed up, and he said, this is my mother, And his mother said, "Thank you for what you're doing for my son." Fast forward, we stayed in touch. The kid grew up, left the gang, married. He sent me pictures of his son.
Wow.
And his mother would send me Christmas cards every year and keep me posted of what, her son was doing, that sort of thing. Which was very gratifying because it told me we were making a difference.
Right.
So what we would do and hang out with them, and this is how I learned how to shoot pool, because we hung out wherever they hung out. They would say, "Hey, Howard, you want to shoot pool?" I said, "I don't know how to shoot pool. We'll teach you. By the way, the loser pays." I said, "Okay, all right. Here's a way for them to shoot pool, and they have a sap who will pay, But it's a way for me to get to know them and
Right.
where they hang out." So I learned how to shoot pool. I don't know if you remember, but I used to shoot pool with Julian, and he asked me once, "Papa, where did you learn how to do this?" or something. We had a pool table set up, I think, in Emily's house. That's where it was, here in Emily's house. Anyway, and we would take them on trips. I'd take them to Madison Square Garden. When Patterson, who was a heavyweight champion, was training, I took a group of them to Patterson's training camp.
Oh, wow.
And Patterson came out to meet them. Patterson himself understood what was going on because he had contact with gang groups when he was growing up. So, and then I would take them to, I don't remember this place in New Jersey. It was a park, and I remember them seeing cows, and I remember going near the cows, and they were saying, "Hey, Howie, don't go, man, he'll attack you." And I'm saying, "It's just a cow, man, come on." Well, they were confined to the city.
They didn't know.
And they didn't, a cow was a country animal that could attack you. And so what we wanted to do was broaden their horizons. And so we would get free tickets. The city would get free tickets to Madison Square Garden fights, or to the Apollo Theater, or to first-rate movies, or to, and so I took them to see all of these things. I got to see them, or to the circus, or what was going on, Radio City Music Hall. So that was my thing with gang groups.
Was there ever a time where you were involved in a violent encounter?
Not that it was, we would, one of the things that we told them, we were required to tell them, one, if we know you guys were going to go down, meaning if you're going to go conflict with other gangs, we're going to call in the police. Two, if we know you're on drugs, we're going to call in the police. We know you're carrying weapons, you're going to call the police. And one night I found out that one of the members, the leader of the group, was carrying a weapon. And I told him, and by this time I'd gotten to know him, because I didn't want them to know. We didn't want them.
Right.
We can't trust you. We thought, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And I told them. So the cops knew that this guy was carrying. It happened to be a night that they were going to go down against their rival gang, because we had Frank and I had exchanged intelligence what was going to go on. And so the cops were on the beat and ready for the encounter. And so I was somewhat on edge as to what would go down that night. But it didn't go down because we had enough intelligence to stop it. So that's the only thing but there were some other times when I was assigned temporarily to other units in East Harlem, where it was much more violent than in
Astoria.
and Central Harlem, then in Astoria. And there were times when I was in Central Harlem and East Harlem where things got pretty, kind of, sticky, and you were wondering what the hell is going to go down.
Mm.
But no, I was never in any danger because we had enough intelligence and we had enough credibility, with the gangs that we could kind of lower the temperature by talking with. I could call my counterpart who worked in another gang or what I heard, and I didn't have any knowledge of that gang. But look, I hear from such and such and such and this, and we could comment. Or we would be at a center where all gangs could come in. This was in East Harlem, and I was always on edge then because you never knew what was going to go down there. So I was always glad to get home after a night at that particular, center, because the gangs a few people could come in from here, a few people could come in here, and not only did you have gang members, you had but it was just a volatile situation, and so anything could happen. But we're lucky that I don't remember any workers being injured or anything.
So I want to bring the focus back on to family for a minute.
Okay.
So you guys got married in 1957.
That is correct, right, July.
So you're living in Brooklyn. Can you talk about any interaction you had with Mom's family and also your family? Were you able to see your family, your parents, your siblings? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Right, okay. So we got married and we were living in Brooklyn, and by that time we're settling into married life. We don't have children. I think we've covered that, and moving into the Orange apartments on. But at that time, the contact with my family, yes, of course, I still talk with my mom, I still talk with my dad, I still talk with my, with my family, period, yeah. Of course, as you know, my family lived in Alabama. My parents and Lucille and Blackie. My brother lived in Pennsylvania, so I had touch with him. My brother James was in California, and so on. We had no contact with your mom's family at that time. It wasn't until quite some time later that the family, your mom's family, contacted us. And yeah, go ahead, honey.
Don't forget we did have contact with Judy and Dave.
Oh, that is okay. Let me just change that. I want to thank you and little Esther
and
yeah,
Joanna.
Okay, let me just go back and thank you we need that. When we first got married, and my recollection is we were in Brooklyn Heights then. We were still in the Heights when I got a letter from little Esther saying something to the effect, and I wish I had that letter. I don't remember deliberately. I wouldn't have destroyed it, so it may be someplace. And it said, "Dear Howard, I'm your cousin Esther. I live in such and such such. I'm 12 years old. I have reddish brown hair. I'm away at camp now, but I hope to visit you soon. Your cousin Esther." And it was just an adorable, sweet letter.
And she was 12?
She said that for them. That's my recollection.
Wow.
And that was, I think, the first contact someone had written me from the family directly saying this. And of course, fast forward, good, true to her word, she did subsequently visit and visit and visit, as you remember when you were growing up. Also at the time, as Mom mentioned, we had some contact with Dave and Judy. Yes.
Mom's siblings.
Yes, Mom's a brother and younger brother and younger sister. And, but not from members of not from her parents or her aunts and uncles. Later on, when we moved to Park Place, Joanna visited, but by that time, that wasn't the first contact with the family. The family did have contact with us when we were at Prospect Place, because I have a photograph of me holding, we were sitting on the couch, who wasn't born, as to who was born then at the time.
Michael, I guess.
Was it Michael? We'll have to go back and look at that photograph. At that time, Shushi, Connie, Figgy, your mother, and I believe Mars visited. Esther, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
I
The
took
whole
that.
family.
I took that picture. Your dad wasn't. Your grandfather wasn't there. Your dad was not there. That was the first time that they had visited to see. I think that's the first time they saw you, and I think you were holding, or one of them was holding the newest baby. Was it Emily or Michael? I don't remember.
Emily.
Emily, okay, so it was after, that was the first time when Emily was born. That would be a year and a half after your birth. So your dad, your grandfather still hadn't visited. I don't remember his first visit to our house.
I don't either.
I think I remember our first visit to the country, to the Hockenberry Road, but I don't remember his first visit. I want to say something about the family, the Margoshes' family, and the relationship. It's, and I want to talk about it a little, and bear with me. It's never left me. I was very, very hurt, not for myself, because I didn't know the Margoshes nor the Showleys, and so they meant nothing to me. But I was hurt on behalf of Mom. She was my wife, and she was my main concern. I did not want, and I resented, and I still resent to this day, and I make a distinction, I kind of I separate Bert and Harry from the rest of the family, and I'll explain to you that. I still, to this date, have this feeling of resentment toward the Chalet family here now in Margoshes. Feelings that I don't have toward Bert and Harry. It's not where, and I've always been, this has always been my philosophy, it's where you end up that counts. And I came to really love Bert and Harry because they showed me that human beings have the ability to change and to become better people.
We're talking about mom's
And mom and
mom and dad.
Yeah, better people. They became, I felt, very, very good people, supportive people. I didn't see that at first, and I resented them, and it took me a long time to forgive them for what they did, but I did. And Esther's father apologized to me. He asked me once, come Howard, come take a walk with me. He did it on 2 occasions, but one occasion was to apologize. We walked around, this was in New Jersey. We walked around, he was in tears, and he apologized. And I told him it was okay, and it was. Again, people, human beings, one of the things about humans is that we have the ability to adapt and to make changes and to become better or worse. And he chose to become better, and kudos to him for that. And I said, fine, and we went on from there. Now, but before then, there were a lot of little things that went on that I resented. The same with your mother. She never really apologized, but her actions toward us was such that I certainly willing, I was just happy to call her mom. She was I saw her as a good person, supportive person, and so we moved on from there. The others, even now, for example, I will see things on Facebook where mom's birthday or something, or some anniversary or something, and how it's responded to as opposed to when some other member of the family will post it and it's responded to. Mm-hmm. And it's just little things like that. And I went to, you alluded to not going to Seder's. I went to these things for years, Seder's, bar mitzvahs,
every year,
every Seder, every bar mitzvah, every family outing. I did that because I did not want Esther to be estranged from her family.
And you were the only black person there.
Yeah, I was the only black person there. And I remember being, and one time I remember once I was saying, okay, I've had it with this, but I stayed because of Mom. And I don't think I ever mentioned this to Mom, because you can't mention every little thing. Or like my mechanic used to say when I used to take my car in, and I say, okay, how much do I owe you? And he said, Jesus, Howard, I can't, you can't charge for everything, I remember going to a Seder at the Showleys when they were in, I think they were in Parianville. Yeah, they were in Parianville then. One of Connie and Shushi's friends, I think she was the wife of a dentist. I had met this woman once, and I said, I think, she was coming from one room to another, and she passed me by, and I didn't think I had met her before, and I think I said to her, hi, I'm Howard Luckett, and she said, I know who you are, and she walked right on past,
Wow.
Yeah, and there was little things like that, and there were a couple of there was over the years little things like that. And I said, and I said, okay, hold it in. Because again, I didn't want to, come on, let's get out of here. That would then sever the ties, what we had been working for years to build up. And, and she'd be back where she started. And it wasn't fun for her being away from her family. So I just hold on to those things, and finally, about 5 years ago, I decided, okay, I'm done with Seder's and everything. And then there were remarks from the family about, why is Howard not coming to Seder's anymore? I don't know if you remember that, Esther.
Sure.
You know, why is this that? As if, oh, why is this this? Why this? And I said, you know, anyway. So that's it. But you know, you don't let and I don't let it define my life. It can't. I don't. It doesn't. It's not something that eat at me, but I'm aware of it. It's part of me. It happened, just as having kids is a part of me. It happened. You can't forget that. You know, it's that. But I've moved on from it.
I just wanted to interject one thing, that when you said you were the only black, there came a time when you weren't the only black.
Well,
when Shushy's daughter adopted
yeah.
2 black children.
But that happened much later.
That happened much later. And that is very, very interesting. That in itself is worth commenting on. But I don't know that has any relevance to this. But that's another tale. But go on with your. When we were married, I continued. I wanted, by the way, very much to take Mom, of course, to meet my parents because they were too old to travel. But of course I couldn't do it because they lived in Mobile. But my mom did either speak with Esther, or certainly I know she wrote to you.
And spoke
to you.
But you never met her.
Yeah, but they spoke on the phone, which I was very, very pleased to do. Not that I knew my parents wouldn't have any problem with it.
Did you ever speak to Dad's dad?
I don't think so.
He was at that time
mother.
in confined to bed, and he later died of a stroke. But no, I don't think so.
Okay. I do have questions about. Can you talk a little bit more about? So did you return to Mobile at any time?
Also, Howard, you don't mention Ida. We saw Ida
Oh,
frequently.
we did.
At that
There's no
time.
question. Oh, yeah. And some of that, Jonathan remembers some of it. He doesn't. During that time, we would see Ida frequently. We'd go there. We would go there and watch football with Ida and one of her partners, or what's his name? What was his name? I forgot. Not Herbie. No. Oh, I've forgotten his name. He was a taxi driver. We liked him. Obi, I think his name was. I think it's Obi.
No.
I think.
Obi is.
No, I know who. Yeah, I know. I think his name was Obi too. Anyway, it was close to that. We would go there and watch the Super Bowl, and somebody asked you, do you remember that?
Yeah.
And we would go there, and she would come. So we saw Ida regularly, no question about that. Yes.
But you never went back to Mobile.
To Mobile, no. I went back once. I went back to funerals. That's it.
So, and your parents were never able to travel up here.
No.
So, and I never met them.
No, none of you met them. You met just my oldest sister and Ida.
But
and
obviously,
Blackie.
when they were still alive when I was born.
Yeah.
But you were an infant then.
Yeah, sure. You were,
Yeah.
because that's when they died.
Don't
around
forget,
that
it wasn't just that they were elderly. It was illegal to be intermarried. at
Well,
that
of course.
time.
Oh, yeah.
So I
you
wouldn't
know
have been
that
able to
it was
travel.
certainly. Yeah. Well, you couldn't have traveled anyway then. That's
So
right.
talk about that a little bit more.
Well, interracial marriages were at that time when we married in 1957 was illegal in many states. As a matter of fact, it took this interracial marriage in New Jersey. Wasn't that
Of the Lovings.
that was their name, the Lovings?
Yeah, they made a movie out of it.
Yeah. Where things it opened up. But it's interesting when I thought of that, and I thought of it almost at the time back then, it was interesting that interracial marriages were relatively rare. But think about it, on our block, in our neighborhood, we had several.
Mm-hmm.
We had Mom and myself. We had
Owens.
the Owens. We had the couple right down the street on our block with Curtis and his parents.
Mm-hmm.
That's 1, 2, 3. And there was an interracial marriage, I think right off Underhill, or right on the corner of Underhill.
Right.
So there was 4 just on our block in our neighborhood I could think of. And I always thought that was very, very interesting. That, but of course, interracial marriages are common now all over the place. But
What happened with your parents?
well, my parents, you know, like all parents die. My father had lost his sight some years earlier, and for a while, you know, he hung on, but then and then he was confined to bed for a long time, and with the stroke, and later on he had a stroke. And I think back at the time now, looking at modern medicine, and I think about that, and I thought about that many years later. Had he been alive nowadays, I think he could have survived both the blindness, you know, that took his sight, the disease that took his sight, as well as the stroke that finally, you know, killed him. With my mom, she died of cancer, and she had cancer of the mouth, and she died. My dad died at home. She died in a hospital. And
Do you remember when that was?
yeah, no, I'd have to go back and look at the dates, but it was I think 19, it was about 1962 when my mom died, and I think my father died in 1963. Wait.
No,
Yeah.
he died first.
No,
didn't he?
my dad died first
Yeah.
in 1960, late 62, I think it was. Right after you
I
were
don't know, but
born.
John was
Right
very young.
right after, yeah. And then
Probably less than
and
2
then
years old.
my mom died a year later. Yeah. Yes,
And
I
then
do.
your brother died.
And then my brother died, and I remember
within the same time
Which
frame.
brother?
my Blackie, and I remember.
Not
And then
Blackie,
George
Black.
James.
Albert
Not
George
Blackie.
Albert died. My brother George Albert, and I remember when those deaths occurred like that. I remember feeling that I was going to be next. That
What did George Albert die of?
he had cancer also, but I felt that I was going to die also because so many members of my family was going to die, and I remember expressing it to you.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah, you went through a very severe
I just
time.
Depression.
Yeah.
that I was going to die, and I've never felt mentally so vulnerable. So that I was, and I was really immortal. I was going to any minute I was going to go too. So it took me a long time to get over that feeling.
So we're recording this in 2021. It's several days after Father's Day, and as you guys know, I came up to Boston to visit my parents, and you've spent a lot of time, Dad and Mom, just talking about your life, and I just wonder what your thoughts are on just being a black man in America in 2021. Like, you've experienced so many things that so many of us have not experienced. And let me kind of rephrase that. I think every black person in this country experiences racism, regardless of what age you are.
Precisely.
I certainly know that I have. When you were talking about the satyrs and things, I mean, I mentioned to you off camera that at a young age, I just stopped going to the satyrs. And it was because one time when I was in my second year of college at Cornell, I was someplace in New Jersey, probably at the Shalley's house, because the satyrs were always held at the Shalley's house. And one of the family members, I remember talking to them, telling them that I was at Cornell, and somebody made a comment about, oh, well, were you on a basketball scholarship? And I just remember feeling like, okay, I don't need to deal with this anymore. You know, when I was in high school, I had to come to these functions, but I'm a man now. I don't need to subject myself to this. And from that point, I never went to the satyrs. And as you and Mom know, I just turned 61. So it's literally been over 50 years, or close to 50 years that, or 40 years that I have kind of distanced myself. And this past year was really the first time that I took part in a satyr via Zoom.
Right.
So we've all experienced racism, but you as a 93-year-old man, black man, who has endured so much from the very beginning. I mean, literally from the moment that you were born into this environment where it was racist, and things happened to you in boarding school and in high school and then in the military. And it's at every step of the way you experience things that nobody should have to experience. And I've always admired how genuine you are with your love for Mom, and also just how genuine you are as a human being. And I think that, I sometimes wonder how you do that, because I think a lesser man would just not be as genuine and understanding given all the things you've gone through. Does that make sense?
Well, thank you. And well, first of all, that and you're I'm prejudiced, but you're a great son. Thank you for saying those wonderful things about your father. But one of the things about black people and experiencing racism, and it's made us strong. It's made black people strong. This is one of the things that I take away from this, that and I'm so proud of who I am. I'm proud of being a black man, a male, who have survived the country that I have wanted to just give my all for, but who has come up lacking in returning that love. There's this unrequited love. The country has a lot to do, but even though things have been miserable and they continue to be miserable, not that there hasn't been progress, there's still so much to be done. And I am still optimistic but saddened as to what's going on now, because I've spent my whole life thinking, okay, it's going to be better, it's going to be better, it's going to be better. But decades go by, it gets a little better, and then it doesn't get better. And we're at a point now where it's absolutely horrible what's going on in this country.
Right.
Absolutely horrible. And so what do? Do you abandon that optimism or that hope, or, you know, and say, okay, and just give up? And I say, no, just keep plugging. You know, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, obviously. But I think the people who are here pass on what they have learned in dealing with racism to their offspring, and said, just, you know, just keep on trekking and try to make things better. Sort of what we were doing, Mom and I did less than a year ago, you know, demonstrating and making our voices known, heard about how we feel about racism in this country. We've spent a lot of time, you know, walking on the picket line out front here, giving interviews to people and saying, you know, this has to change. Inviting people here, representatives, political people to talk to, telling them, letting them know that they have to do their job. It's difficult. We have to just keep trying. But it's made us strong as Black people. This is a thing that I'm so proud of, because it just teaches us, you know, that how to survive. And Black people, we aren't going away. We aren't going away. You know, we're going to survive. Emily said something to me a year ago or so, very, very interesting. She said, Dad, I notice you're different when you're here in your surroundings, here at Snow Place, and when you go out. We were at Costco. And that's true. All white Black people do this. When we're in our safe surroundings, we're like, you know, like plants. We kind of, you know, but
Let your hair down.
You let your hair down. But soon as when the wind starts blowing and the blizzards start coming, we kind of, you know, we buckle up and we prepare ourselves for what's coming. And I do this. I do it unconsciously, sometimes consciously. And I could cite you situations where I've gone through here meaning in Boston, and where I've walked into situations and open, and then I've had to not only close up, but, you know, ready to really attack the situation head on. So we do that. We've learned to do that. We've learned to adapt, and that's good. And we should continue to do that until things reach a point where we don't have to, where the breeze is always warm. We don't have to, like a leaf, curl up as soon as it gets cold. You know, when, you know, we detect danger coming in, we have to protect ourselves. Like the majority, you can walk down the street or walk in a store and say, "Oh, I'm cool. Nothing is going to happen." You
When
know,
do you think that will be?
I don't know, but I'm hoping that'll be a time when, you know, I don't have to worry about my children, grandchildren driving down the road. They're going to be pulled over because of an expired tag or tail light that's broken, and that's going to escalate into, you know, a situation that leads to, you know, a horrible end.
I watch you interact with people here at Snow Place, and Snow Place is it's an independent living facility. There's also an assisted living facility on the other side, but you guys are in the independent living facility.
Right.
But you live with, I mean, most of your neighbors are white.
Mm-hmm.
There's really just a smattering of African Americans here. But I watch you day to day interacting with your white neighbors who are in their 90s. Some of them are 100 years old, literally, and you are nice to everybody. And sometimes I wonder how you do that, knowing that these people grew up in the same generation that you did. They grew up probably hating you and your kind.
It's very interesting that you mention this. Well, I am who I am, and that's just who I am. I'm nice to people, and I expect people to be nice in return. I don't want to conflict with people, but I don't shy away from conflict. I never have, and I'm never going to, because that's the way I am. One of the things I've learned and to survive is to be strong. There are ways of navigating the system. You know, you can go with the flow, and you can go around, you can go over it and under it, and sometimes you have to just hit it head on. And I'm prepared to do that if I have to, but I don't want to do that. My preference is, because it's a quality of life issue. I want to have a quality of life for me, for my wife, for my children. So I try to be that way with the people, and I get that in return for the most part. But it's interesting that you mention that there are people who are my age or older. And so, yes, they came back from this area. When we moved here, there were people, and there are different kind of people, and this is what gives you optimism. The world isn't all bad. When you talk about racism, there's racism, but there's goodness, and we could spend the rest of the day talking about this issue, and I could tell you the bad things, and I can tell you the good things that I've encountered. But I remember when we first moved in, there were people who looked at me, and you could see the hatred.
What is he doing here?
Pardon?
What is he doing here?
What is he doing here? Yes. I would look at this person, he or she would not bat an eye. Fast forward, these people that I have in mind became good friends. We worked on committees together. We worked with clearing out invasive plants, and we worked in the garden together, and we did all sorts. We went out to lunch together. They invited us to lunch.
They got to know you.
Got to know me. And this tells me a lot. Several of them. We had several incidents like this. Several instances in which people didn't know us but became very, very friendly. They got to know us. And this was revealing because it tells me that, we have much more in common than we realized. All you have to do when you want to, if you want to talk about differences of races, and just sit people down and you start talking. We all have the same issues. Our kids growing up, or,
right.
Having homework, kids staying out, or what school are we going to send them to, and this, that, and the other, and then having trouble, do we have enough money for the mortgage, you should apply for this kind of job. Everybody has these same problems, and all you got to do is sit down and you start talking and forget about racism, and you find out, whoa, and it becomes frustrating because imagine what we could accomplish if we were all working together in step. Say like the military. The military couldn't accomplish a damn thing if you had these different elements working in apart from each other. But anyway, we could talk about that. Then there are a lot of good people too, a lot of good things that happen, and you build on that also.
Well, as I said, I admire you because sometimes I just get tired.
We do. I do too.
Tired of being.
I do too.
Walking around with a smile on my face when people are not returning
yeah.
a smile.
Yeah, I often do, and I ignore them. For example, even now, I need my space. So even now, when Mom and I walk out downstairs, and it's not that I have anything to do against people. They're sitting out front, and Mom and I will walk out back, and we'll sit overlooking the pond, and because we just we want our space, and also you get some. I'll see some new people will come in sometime, and they'll walk, and I will just ignore them. There were times when I would stare back. I told you this before, but it's not worth it to me now, and I'll just go. I'll either just go and sit down right there and just
Do your thing.
do my thing. I'm looking at the trees, the plants. I like to look at the clouds. I used to do that, by the way. It used to be a pastime when I was a kid. Look at the clouds and make pictures out of them, and just enjoy it and ignore them, and but anyway.
So let's. I want to end with this one thing that our family is blessed in that you and Mom are both in your 90s. You're still here, and you've had a chance to meet not only your grandchildren but your great grandchildren.
Yeah.
You've got 4 great grandchildren. Is there something specific that you would want to say to them, or is there something that you'd like to leave them with?
Yeah, I want them to always be authentic. I want them to be themselves. I want them to please, you be the ones to define who you are. You be the one to decide, this is who I want to be. Don't let anybody else define you. People are great at putting you into categories. Like this person who said, oh, you are the, basketball player. Like there was one woman here who said to me, I loved her. We got along well together, and she was on the other side. And we used to see each other on the elevator and chat and everything. And one day she said to me, if you're not doing anything today, would you come in and hang up my picture? And then I realized she wasn't talking about me. She was talking about the maintenance man. But I still loved her because she was such a sweet woman. But this is, people see you and they define you by your looks. You look at a person, just don't allow people to, you can just laugh this off. You know who you are, and you know who you want to be, and you be that person. Be strong, and problems come on, you deal with them, and you're going to be fine.
Wise words. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.
I love you. You are
I love
such a great storyteller.
I love you too.
And I'm so glad that we got a chance to do this. And scene.
Me too.
Thank you, Mom. Love you too.
That was really
Esther, did I
wonderful.
tell you about?
Wait, I better turn the camera off before you start telling additional stories.
Esther, did I tell you about?
This vacant lot right here is where 1261 Congress Street used to be, and that's where the house where Papa Joe, Miss Olivia, Uncle Howard, Albert, and I guess Aunt Lucia and Ida, and Uncle Blackie all used to stay there. And this is where I grew up in 1263 Congress Street. Okay, and I'm just gonna go down here. This house right next door to 1263 is 1265, and that's okay. What y'all looking at? It's this is 206 North Ann Street. As you can see, look like it's burned out. But this is where Uncle Howard was born, in this house right here. And this used to be, Miss Faison stayed here when I was here, and before that, the Clemens stayed there. But I don't know if it was Miss Bestita or what, but maybe Uncle Howard can tell you who was there. But this is the house.